Hey everyone, this is Prince from Desi Programmer. Welcome to the first video of this Laravel REST API development series. And with this video, we are going to get started with Laravel REST APIs. So the prerequisite that you need for this course is really low. You need to have a grasp with PHP programming. You should be good with the basic JSON concepts. You should be good with basic HTTP concepts such as methods, what a request is, response and stuff like that. And you should have the enthusiasm to learn the course. This course is fairly straightforward and we dive right into code and start making amazing projects. Now if you're watching this course, I assume you to have a knowledge about web development. I assume you to have knowledge about PHP, Laravel, probably even Blade templating, and that is really resourceful. So I'm not going to get into details of what Laravel is. In simple terms, Laravel is an open source web framework which is known for its server-side handling of routing, HTML authentication and Blade templating. It has almost 1 million live websites which are being used in production right now. It has 64,000 GitHub stars, which obviously shows the trust that people have in this framework. It's a battery included framework, which means that most of the thing that you need for a web framework to do is already included in here. You don't have to install any third-party dependency for that. This is something that you will see right in the video itself. And it's actually easy to work and manage. If you're using simple PHP or even PHP PDO to create a website or maybe an application or maybe an API, and then if you do the same with Laravel or even other PHP frameworks, although I like Laravel better, you will see that it's really easy to work, it's really easy to manage, or it's really easy to maintain this. So let's get started with first creating a project and let's see how this works out. Now, before I get deep into this and start writing so many commands, I want you to know that I already created this particular blog. This may be changed or something, but you can always find this in the blog sections of my website, and there you can always find these simple commands which we are going to use throughout this course. You don't have to remember these commands because, well, obviously if you're working on multiple frameworks, then there are many commands and you may forget. That's completely fine. This is kind of a cheat sheet that you can always use. And as you can see here, we have a simple project which is composer, create project, Laravel and something like that. So let's go to our terminal. I already have this directory called Laravel tutorials in my D drive. That's where I'm going to store everything. And here I have to create a project. So I have to say composer space create underscore project, create dash project space Laravel / Laravel and then the name. This is the first one where we are going to understand the basics that we need. So I'm going to make it Laravel _API _basics. Hit enter and this will create a project for us in Laravel API basics in the same directory where we are running this particular command. Now I've already talked about setting up everything that you need for development. So I assume that you already have composer installed and added to path. You already have PHP installed and added to path, and you have a text editor right in your hand. I'm going to use VS Code. Alright, looks like we are up and running. We have a simple warning which we can ignore right now. So now if I do a quick ls or dir, you can see that I have a directory called Laravel API Basics. If I switch to Laravel API Basics, here you see multiple files. Make sure that you open your code editor in this project folder itself. That's really necessary for things to work. I mean, not for things to work, for linters, stuff like that to work. So I'll simply use the code dot command, which means open code editor, and use this particular directory. So this is what we have right in here. Let's go on full screen, and as you can see, we get so many files right out of the box. Now if you're already familiar with Laravel, I know that you might know what this file do. If you're not familiar with this, if you really want to just learn API development right here, that's completely fine. I won't go too deep with what each file does because most of this file you won't even be touching, neither right now nor in production too. So let's not worry about them a lot. Let's just focus on things that you really need to touch. So right from the top, the first folder, which is app, well, obviously you need to touch this folder a lot. Like you have to make a lot of changes in this particular folder. Like the folder itself says that, hey, this is the app. Here you can see console, exceptions, HTTP, models and providers. Console you can ignore if you are not writing any console commands. Exceptions again you can ignore. HTTP really important. We have controllers, we have middleware. So all our routing controllers are going to go in this particular folder. So always remember, whenever I say add a controller, it's going to go right in here. Okay. And then we have middleware. All our other middlewares are going to be in this particular middleware folder. Really important. Then we have models, or our database models are going to be in this particular models folder. We don't worry about providers too right now. So the app folder, really important one. Bootstrap, we have the prior bootstrap, we have some configuration. Database, kind of important folder. We don't worry about everything else other than the migration folder, which has migrations. So basically, when you add any particular model, a migration file has to be created, and that migration file will have your table schema. So for example, this is a user table. Alright, this is a schema for that, and this is going to give you an ID, a string of name. So basically a name which will be a string, email which will be a string, and it has to be unique, email verified as, which is going to be its timestamp, and it could be nullable. Now if you're worried about what this is, then basically if you don't know what we're talking about, so this is basically ORM. So normally you use raw SQL commands. Raw SQL commands means if you want to if you want to create a new user, you might be using something like insert values into user, and then you insert every data right in there. But first of all, that's really low level. So there are many issues there. You have to write really long code, and you have to check everything. Otherwise, you're going to make so many errors. So this is kind of an ORM level, which makes things simpler and secure. So we are going to write code here, and this will create a table for us. It's going to be really amazing. So whatever migration file we create, we are going to find that here. And that's pretty much it actually right now. Okay, you have to go to routes where you have api.php. This has all the API routes. And that's it. Just 3 folders that you have to touch through almost 75% of this tutorial. And once you are done with this, you will know what other files do and what they don't do. And sorry, by the one last file .env, which basically has all the configuration. So if you are adding anything, you might want to change the configuration here. So for example, mailer, pusher app ID, your database, and then your app name, your app's environment, okay, whether it's debug or in production, or what this app's URL is going to be. Just simple things as that. Let's ignore everything. Let's just go back to our terminal, and since we have already created a project, let's run php artisan serve. This will start a server. As you can see, it says Laravel development server started as 127.0.0.1:8000. So it started on localhost at port 8000. Really nice. Let's go to our browser. Let's go to localhost :8000. Enter, and there you see, this is the simple Laravel website that we get. It is running on our localhost. Now this by default handle all the web routes, so you can be using Blade templating engine, things like that to make changes here. Something that we really don't care about right now. What we care about is APIs, and as you can see in routes you have web, which basically, as you can see, sends this welcome view. We have console, we don't care about that now. We don't even care about channels, we care about APIs. In API we don't have any route, and all these APIs are basically handled by /API route. So if I go back here, if I go to /API, we should be handling API routes. Now that too will give you an error, because here we don't have any home route. We have the simple middleware that we don't know what it does. So I will simply put up a home route here, and then I will explain in detail how you can put routing and how that works and stuff like that. So we have a simple home route that will take a function, which will take a variable of type request, and we can simply return some data. So let's say return welcome. Let's save it. Let's go back. Let's refresh. And now we get welcome. Obviously not something that we are going to do since we're talking about API development. Let's close our browser and let's open Postman. As I've already mentioned, there are multiple tools for API development. Postman and Insomnia are famous, widely used, and something that I really like. I'm using Postman for this entire tutorial. So what we need to do here is that we need to make API calls, and our entire idea throughout this tutorial or this series is that you make simple API call and we send the data back in JSON. I'm not talking about XML, HTML or anything. JSON is pretty much the standard right now. So let's click on here. Let's create a new route. So it's going to be localhost :8000/API. Hit enter, and you see you get here welcome. Okay, something that you obviously expected. So that's right. Now let's get started with basic things. Well, so first thing first, let's start talking about routing and how you can handle different HTTP methods. So to create a route, we simply use route : whatever your HTTP method is, for example, get right now, and then what your route URL is going to be. So for example, let's say simple a /route. Now remember, when I say /route, the original URL is going to be whatever your website name is. Let's say desiprogrammer.com/API/route. Okay, but since this is already handled by the API middleware, and /API will be added by default. So then we have a simple function. Alright, the function takes a variable of type request. Let's say $request, and this has to return some data. Now the best part is that whatever data you return is automatically parsed and handled accordingly. Let's say for example, in our /route, which is a GET request as of now, I simply return a text that says welcome. Alright, let's save it. Let's go back to our Postman, and if you go to /route, you make a GET request, it says welcome. Now pay attention here, it is simple HTML text. If you go to header, it says hey, just text /HTML. Right, this is treating this as HTML, although this is basically plain text. But we already care about sending JSON data. So for that you have to put as an array. You have a key. So we have key, let's say message. Then we need value. So for example, welcome. Save this, and now this will automatically be sent as JSON data. Let's go back to Postman. Let's click on send. And yep, you have JSON response. So this is really important. Alright, whenever you are sending response, it has to be JSON, and you can simply use PHP arrays to send JSON data. Now talking about different HTTP methods, this is a GET request. If you go back to Postman, if you make it a post, it's not going to work, because obviously this is only the allowed method right here, which is GET. Now if you know about HTTP verbs such as GET, POST, PUT, DELETE or others, then the task is very simple. All that you have to do is to simply replace this with your particular verb, and you're good to go. So if I make a post, and I can say that welcome from post route. Let's just save it. Now if I go back to Postman, if I click on send, then hey, it says welcome from post route. So now this is a post request. You can do something as put. Let's save, go back, click on send, not working, because now you have get and put only. Click on send, and yep, you get the same request. You can also do delete, and I get that, and I understand you guys got the gist right now. So this is the way you can have, a specific HTML request method. But what if you want to handle multiple HTTP request methods at once? So we have options for that too. So let's say you have something like /posts or products, and you want to make sure that no matter what the request method is, you want to just send some products data. For that you can use the any verb. What the any verb does is that no matter what type of request method you're using, it's going to send the response. So here let's say we have some data, $data is equal to some weird data, let's say product name, that's going to be Laravel course. Okay, let's save it. Now you can simply return this $data here. That's what I wanted to show. Let's save, and now let's go back to our Postman. Instead of calling routes, I am saying products. Hit enter. It says okay, Laravel course. Let's make a get request. It gives us the data. Let's make a post request, gives us the data. Delete request gives us the data. No matter what type of request you are making, which by the way is mostly just get, post, put and delete, but the point is that you are going to get data out of it. But what if you want to handle only some specific kind of request? So let's say that some weird scenario where you want to make sure that you handle all the requests that is sent to this particular route only if it's get or post. If it's any other request, then you don't want to handle. For that you have the match verb. So you can do something like route : match. Now you can specify in an array what methods you want to handle. So let's say I want to handle get request and I want to handle delete request. Okay, a weird API where you can only create or you can only see their stuff or delete your stuff. You can't create from here. And let's call it specific. Everything else is going to be pretty much same. So let's just copy this and let's just paste it right here. Okay, welcome from specific. Let's save this. Let's go to Postman now. And now if I go to this slash specific, if I click on send, it's going to say welcome from specific, because obviously we are making a get request, something that we're accepting. If I make a post request, and that's where we get the error, something that we were expecting, not accepting. Expecting because we know that we are only accepting get and delete request, nothing other than that. So if I make a delete request right here, yep, now you have the data. So that's how you can handle routing. I think this is, a lot more than you even need. Still, if you want to know the request method that was being used, that's again simple. You have to simply use this particular $request variable and call method. Save this. Let's go back. Obviously, I'm making delete request. So if I click on send, it's going to say delete. If I make get, it's going to send get. So any case the need arrives, you can simply get the data from here, and then you can check, on your own whether it's a get request, post request, put request, or delete request. That's pretty much from my side about request. Now let's talk about route controllers. Obviously, just as I said, you are going to have all your API routes in this particular file, but these routes are not going to be as simple as this, right? You're going to have a lot of code right here which may do something like, grab all the data from the database, or if you have a route like register a user, then there are going to be too many functions right here. If you code everything in this one particular file, it's not going to make much sense. It's going to be very cluttered, not something that we want. And for that, Laravel gives us something called as controller. So you can create a controller which can handle all the requests of any particular group. So for example, if you want to handle request for authentication, you can have an auth controller which can handle register, login, logout, or just shows a basic user profile. Then you can have a cart controller which handles everything related to creating a, adding a product to cart, updating the product in cart, deleting the cart, or making sure that all the products in your cart are, let's say, just bought by you. You click on buy now and everything from your cart is now deleted and transferred that to your orders. Anyway, let's create a controller and let's see how that goes. Again, if you go back to my website, you can see that I already have everything about controllers. This is the code that we use. Sorry, PHP artisan, not made middleware. PHP artisan, make controller, and then --API. This --API is something that I will discuss in the next video. The only difference is that, you see, when you use a --API, it adds 4 methods by default, not 5 methods by default. These methods are actually kind of CRUD methods. So it just assumes that you're going to do a CRUD operation in this particular controller, and it just adds the index method, show method, delete method, update method, just for simplicity. Not something that we need in this video. In this video, let's get to the core concept of controller. So let's go to our terminal. Let's say close. Let's use PHP artisan make controller, and let's say this is going to be a basic controller. Okay, let's hit enter, and remember what I said, all these controllers and everything are going to be placed in your app directory. Let's go to app, and here you have HTTP controllers, and there you go, basic controller, just something that we created right now. Now to handle a request in this basic controller, the method is again simple. We create a function, so let's say public function. We give the function a name, let's say index. Okay, this function takes a variable of type request, let's say $request, and you have to send a response. So I'm simply saying return, okay, message, which is going to be simply response from controller. Okay, let's save. Let's go back in here, and now how can we use this controller? Again, very simple. First of all, you have to obviously import it, and the method is simple. Use app/http/controllers, okay, / your controller name. So basic controller. Let's go all this way down here, and now I want to handle through a controller. So I have to say something like route : get method, and then let's say I want to handle let's just say CNTR controller. And since we are going to handle this request through a controller, we have to use basic controller, okay, : class, and then we have to call the method. So the method is going to be index right here. Let's save this. Let's go back to our terminal. Let's say PHP artisan serve, because we need to start our server. Now let's go back to our postman and let's make a request to CNTR. So I know it's really weird, just hang on with me. And there you go, you get response from controller. So now you can just keep adding your own methods, whatever they are, and then can handle your entire code in this controller. Makes sense why you have to use the controller, right? Whatever your method name is, just add it here. And controller will make sure that you don't have two methods with the same name. If that's your doubt, let me just copy and paste it, save it, and there you have error. So that's something which will be taken care of. So that's how you can use controller. I'm not going to get into details right here because I'm sure you don't really need that. It's basic, simple. Throughout the course, when we make projects, you will understand the concept. You will grab the concept. Now I want to talk about querying. So most of the time when you see on whatever this particular URL is, we send some data through query parameters. That's what I want to discuss about, how you can handle and parse them. So let's say QRY. Now this is particular route, and I want to show you how you can handle the query that is passed here. So this is a particular route. Let's copy this, save it, go to our postman, let's paste it, save, and now it says response from controller working found. Now you can either put your query from here. I'm simply saying query user ID is equal to 12. So whatever this is, this simply means that now here you have to retrieve that particular user ID, and only then you can process according to it. Let's say I want to get all the posts from this particular user which you're sending as a query parameter. So I have to retrieve that. Only that I can make a database request and get all the posts and then send the data. So first thing first, what you have to do is that you have to either send this data as this way, which since it's an API testing platform, as you can see, we have this query parameter option where you can also send the key and the value. What our goal is to make sure that we retrieve this particular value. That is really very simple. Okay, all that you have to do is return dollar this particular request, okay, that you have right here, then just add the key. Okay, let's save it, let's make the request, and there you go, you get 12, which is the data that you're sending. Make it 112, send 112, make it 123, send there 123. You see how simple Laravel make things for you. And interestingly, if I just change the key, click on send, now it's going to be nothing. Alright, so you can check if this is not null, that means you are getting data. Let me show you. You have to simply do something like $data is equal to this, and you can have a key called query, and this query is going to give you a data which is going to this request.user. Let's paste it and then simply return this $data. Let's save, let's go back, send, and now this query is particularly null. So you can check if this data is not null, then you're good to go. Now there are again different methods to retrieve the same data. So completely up to you what you're going to use. So for example, if you don't have access to this $request method, you can simply call the request function here, and then this can call the query, and here you can pass that as a key. So user, let's go back, let's change this to user, click on send, and there again you have query which is 123. So this is one way. Obviously there are different ways using which you can grab the same data. Both of them work really fine. You don't have to worry about it at all. So this is all about parsing query parameters, and obviously you can send multiple query parameters too. So for example, this is the user ID, and I want all the type of the post that I want is, let's say, images. Click on send. Obviously you're going to get only this. What I want here is type 2. So let's say type, and this is our particular key. That's really important. So type, save, let's click on send, and there you go. I want all the posts from user, which is 123 ID, and I want all the images, not the videos. That's how you handle query parameters in Laravel. Moving forward with this, next thing that we have to talk about are parameters or dynamic routing. So most of the time you will see, for example, let's say in this particular tutorial itself, we have this particular thing called as query. I can add something like let's say query /data/ I can just keep adding here, and this is going to be my URL, right? No problem at all. But this URL is not always static. What I mean to say is that when you have this QRY, right now this is static. You have a method that handles it and you get the data and you work fine. Sometimes you might see that this is not static. So for example, API/users/1. Now here you are sending 1, 2, 3, 4 on anything as such as a parameter. This is basically dynamic, and when you have to handle this, you may have to get these dynamic variables, and that's what we are going to talk about right now. We usually call them as parameters. Alright, so remember, query parameters are when we use the question mark and they are sent as kind of a get request. These are parameters or kind of dynamic routing. So to do that, let's again have our simple route. We are going to have users. Let's save this, and this is going to come from here. Let me just simply copy and paste the same function. Let's rename this as params. Okay, we may have an issue, so params underscore function. Okay, let's copy this, save this, go back to api.php, and now whatever slash users is, it's going to handle by params.function. Let's save it. Let's go back to Postman. Let's click on send again, and oops, we still have an error. It says that hey, it can't find the request. That's really weird, right? We have slash users, still there is an issue. Okay, let's move forward. Let's add /1, save, send. Okay, this works, but what if this is 2, or sorry, what if this is 12? Let's click on send again, and now we have an issue. Remember what I said, this is static routing, this is dynamic, so we can't do something like that. Now there are two concepts that we have to talk about right here. First of all, we have to talk about mandatory parameters, then we have to talk about optional parameters. Mandatory parameters means right here, as you can see, this is kind of a mandatory parameter. So /users route basically can't handle this. Okay, optional parameter means this 12 is optional. Even if you don't give this should work. So obviously we have to handle parameter whether it's mandatory or non-mandatory, and doing that is very simple. So after users, we are going to get a dynamic value, right? So let's click on slash, and let's say that dynamic value is going to be ID. So we simply put that under these curly brackets. Let's save this. Let's go to basic controller, and we know that this controller is handling it. Okay, instead of saying query, let's say it says param, save. Let's go back here. Let's click on send, and again error. Obviously we have to send some data, because you see right now this is a mandatory parameter. Alright, since it's a mandatory parameter, if you don't send a parameter here, it's going to give you an error. If you want to make this an optional parameter, very simple, just add a question mark right here. Now this is an optional parameter. Even if you don't give a parameter, this route is going to work. Okay, and even if you give a parameter, this route is going to work without an issue. So adding a question mark makes it optional. Without the question mark, it's mandatory. Alright, now that it's optional, I really want to grab this particular data. Again, very simple. All that you have to do is to return particular $request. Okay, and then you have to request the ID. Let's click on save and send. You get 12. Okay, just as it was here, it is the same here too. And sometimes some people may come and say that, hey, what if they both, what if there is a conflict? What if I have a query with ID and I have a parameter with ID? Well, my simple answer is, obviously there are ways with which you can understand whether it's a parameter or query, but still, just don't do that. Just don't use the same keys for query parameters, and most of the time you won't even be doing that. Dynamic parameter querying with same keys, really weird. So yeah, we won't worry about that. Simply just don't use that. Now that you know that whether it's a query parameter or a parameter, it's going to use like this. We are simply going to get the data from request, and we are just going to pass the key. Just don't use the same key for query parameters, and there it is. You are good to go. Now whatever value you are sending, 12, 124, you can grab 14, you can grab it here. 124, you can grab it from here. And then you can process your request accordingly. And that's how you can handle either mandatory parameters or optional parameters. Alright, the next thing that I want to talk about is route prefix, and this is something that I have talked about the best REST API practices that you should follow. So basically I talked about versioning, which means most of your, let's say, v1 APIs will have something like v1/users, v1/login, v1/logout, and something like that. Now obviously you might think that for all your routes you may have to put it like this. Alright, so v1/route1. So now this is going to be version 1. Again, you may have to do something like v1/products, something like that. But that's not true. With Laravel this can be done very easily. So let's say you have a bunch of routes and you want all of them to be version 1 route. So what you can do is that you can simply use a route prefix that will do the job for you, and then you can handle it easily. Let's take a look at that, what I'm talking about. So I think my server is up and running. Yep. If you go back to Postman, and let's say I'm simply calling this QRY, let's click on send, and this is what I'm getting. Right now I want all of these APIs to be my version 1 API. So for that we can simply use something like a route. Like first of all, let's just create any simple route that we want. So I'll just go and copy this, okay, and I'm saying paste it here, and this is now a get route. Okay, this says all right, let's just say products, and this gives out some product. Okay, and let's say you have another post route. Okay, and this is also /products, and this will create product. Now I want all of them to be v1, so what I can do is that I can simply cut it and I can put up a route prefix. So you can have something like route :prefix, and here you can prefix something to route. So we can prefix v1 to all these routes. Now this is going to be a group, so we have a group here, and all this group has is this function. Okay, this function takes nothing, but it returns something, and that is all the routes in this particular group. So now all these routes will already have a v1 by default. Remember how I said that all the API routes has a /API by default? Now all this particular group will have a /v1 by default. So let's take a look at that. All right, let's save this. Let's go back to Postman, and now let's try to go to products. Okay, you get product name Laravel course. Reason, because you already have a products here. Okay, but now I can simply add a v1 here, and all the version 1 products will now be handled by this particular products. Okay, if I do a post request, it works, and we get this particular create product. So that's pretty simple. You can just prefix v1 or v2 or whatever you want easily. Alright, so the last thing that I want to talk about in this video is about middlewares. Middleware kind of act as a bridge between your request and a response, and it's a very convenient method to filter out all the HTTP requests that you make. So the way middleware works in Laravel is that, as you can see in the app folder itself, we have a middleware folder which has a bunch of middlewares. You can add your own custom middleware here. You can put that in a configuration, and then you can just tell all the routes that you want to call the middleware for. Okay, and that will go on. So normally the way first we have to create a middleware, and then we have to use it. And if you don't understand the concept of middleware right now, that's completely fine. It could be a bit intimidating for people who don't have any idea about web development whatsoever, but it's actually fairly simple. So the concept of middleware goes that, let's say I have to filter something right in here. Okay, let's say I want to check if the user is authenticated or not. Now if the same thing has to be done in multiple functions, instead of just copy pasting my code everywhere, I can just create a middleware that will process the request for me. So that's something that middleware does actually. Now to create a middleware in Laravel, it's fairly simple. You see, we have this particular command which will create a middleware that you want. So I'll just open up my terminal right in here, and we will simply use PHP. Let's see, PHP artisan make : middleware, and I will name my middleware as custom logger, which will basically log the kind of request that you are making. And now you can see we have this particular custom logger in here. Now the way middleware works is that if you return next, that means this middleware's work is completed, and now it will go to the the actual request that was being called. And if I return something like something from between, that means there was an error and it's not going to call the next request, and that's done. Let's actually save this. My application is already up and running. There is no issue. Let's go to my Postman. Let's click, and that's working. Now I want to make sure that every time there is a request, I want to log that on my console. Okay. So first of all, after creating a middleware, we have to register it. Now to use a middleware, you can either register the middleware and then use it, or you can simply call it as a class name. I'm going to register the middleware and then use it. For that, you have to go to HTTP. Alright, then there is kernel.php. And here you can see we have this particular, middleware protected middleware, which has all these middlewares that we are going to use. Okay. Also, you can see we have middleware group. So for app, these are the middlewares, while for web, these are the middlewares that we're using. And also now here we kind of have a key value pair. So this is something that you can use to call this particular middleware, and that's what I'm talking about. Instead of using the entire class, I'm just going to register it like this and then use it. Alright, so all that we have to do is to give our middleware a name here. So let's say I want to call my middleware logs. Okay, and this is what my middleware path is going to be. It's actually same as this one. Okay, so I can just copy this and I can paste it here. The only difference is that I have to change it. So this is now going to be custom logger. Okay, make sure that your spelling is correct. And now in custom logger, I'm not going to do anything right here. Okay, I have to simply do something like error log, and I'm just going to log $requests, method. All right, let's save this. Now remember, as of now, you don't log the method of the request, right? But after this middleware, we can now log all the methods of the request. Save this, go to Postman, and let's click on products. Okay, this is done. Let's go to terminal, and all right, we are not getting any response. So the reason is because even after adding a middleware, you have added a middleware, but this is not globally. We have to call this middleware. We have to assign the middleware, and there are different ways to do that. If you go back to blog, you can see that there are a couple of ways to call a middleware. So for example, you can protect that for some functions in a controller, or you can call for all functions except one in a controller. So this is what I'm talking about, just for any particular controller. You can do that for all the routes too. You can use a middleware group for all the routes, but I'm going to use that only for a particular function. So here in my basic controller, okay, whatever you call in this particular controller, I want to call my middleware. So we can do something like public function, and I'm going to use a constructor. So you can call construct construct, and now I have to simply call middleware. So for all of this, I am going to call a middleware, and the name of that middleware is, remember what we put, we have logs. Let's save this. Let's go back to our routes.php, sorry, api.php, and here these are the routes that we are handling by our controller. So I'll simply go to Postman, and I will call QRY, hit on send. Let's go back to here, and now you can see, alright, we're not getting in response, and the reason is because this is not a valid URL. I don't have to use the v1 here. Now if I click on send, you can see that we got a response, and we got this response from this particular basic controller. And since here we are using this middleware as a constructor, now as you can see, we are going to get the type of the request that was made. Okay, let's keep doing that. I mean, if you go back here, and let's say if you click on send 3 times, you can see that now we have this 3 times. It was a get request as of now. I don't think my basic controller handles any other request other than get. Let's see, do we? Yep, we only have get request. So the concept is simple, that we are getting this, and that's working fine. Now if you want to call a middleware globally, I mean, I usually prefer calling middleware in the controller itself, but if you really want to call a middleware globally, there are a couple of ways that you can do that. You can either put that in the route middleware, or you can either put that in the web middleware or the API middleware, or you can simply use it as a group. So this is one way to call a middleware. Okay, as you can see, I can just go back to my code here, and now for example, let's say we have this /route. So if I want to call a middleware on this route, I can simply do middleware, and I can simply call my middleware, which will be logs. Save this. Okay, now if I go and I go to route, and if I go back to my terminal, you see we are going to get that request. Okay, if I click on send again, you are going to get that, it was a get request. Send again, and it was a get request. If you want to call multiple middlewares, okay, just as you can see here, it says you can call them as an array. Or if you want to group couple of middlewares as ones, then you can just use this route colon middleware and then group some methods according to that. This is something that we are going to do when we are going to make protected route. So I'm not going to get too deep into the middleware part right now, so that this tutorial is simple and straightforward to everyone. But when we do that, we will talk more about middleware and how you can use that to do so many things. Well, that's pretty much it from my side in this first video, where we have talked about the basics of Laravel, how to get started with it. Now in the next video, we are going to talk about databases, and we are going to create an ideas API to understand the basic CRUD concepts of database, and to understand models, and to understand migrations.